Welcome back in, everybody, to the Birds 365, a Wednesday edition of the show here. Moving right along, John. 23 days until the Eagles kick off and 22 days until the NFL kicks off. So pretty good stuff moving right along in the offseason here. Birds, are they off today, or they got? I guess they have a walkthrough
for the game in advance of the big preseason game.
Yeah, which I would imagine less people are going to play in this one than played in the first one. So I wouldn't get too excited about this one, Eagles fans. But
plenty of people are going to play. It's just not.
Yeah, people. None of the guys that you care to see. I guess you could say
that's not true. Anybody who watches this show knows about the Darian Kennards of the world and the Thomas Bookers and the.
That's true. You're right. You're right. I shouldn't downplay it. And when we had the first game, I was all jacked up because I'm like, forget who's out there. We got an Eagles team in an Eagles jersey tackling a team in another jersey. That gets me fired up. So you're right. From that perspective, I would agree. I digress. Good point, Johnny Mac. John, let's go to our super chat. This is a good super chat. Something we've talked about with the offense is something you've brought up a lot. Cameron Richardson says they already know Jalen can throw deep. Throwing the ball short and intermediate is adding to his bag versus overcorrection. Big plays will still be there. And then there was a lot of other talk just about overcorrection on offense. What's your response, John, to that super chat?
Yeah, well, the problem was in Baltimore, Jalen Hurts wasn't on the field. To a certain degree, when you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, yeah, they're gonna get downfield, and people are gonna see plays. But I've seen this emphasis from Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier, and they've used it the 2.3 second rule, trying to get the football out of your hands in 2.3 seconds, which can be good. If you got Brock Purdy, not necessarily bad if you want to, get plays down the field at times. So when you say the Eagles know, well, Nick Sirianni knows, but he's not running the offense. Does Kellen Moore know? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I presume he knows. Does Doug Nussmeier know? I presume he knows. I presume they want to take advantage of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, because A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith might be the two best players on the team, to be honest. And they have been in this training camp. So you would hope so. But again, with Kenny Pickett on the field and Tanner McKee on the field, and Tanner's 6'6", strong arm guy, their longest pass play was 11 yards. And for those saying, well, the backup receivers stink, okay. But they didn't even try to get the football down the field. So you can't get the football down the field if you're not trying to get it down the field. At least trying to stretch the offense, stretch the defense, excuse me. Look, AJ's too good. Best player on the team. Devontae's too good. Dallas is too good as a tight end. There's going to be big plays, but I just get the feeling that they're more content, pun intended, more content throwing it underneath. And I'm not necessarily a fan of that with this particular talent that they have. They needed to get better at it. Hopefully they are getting better at it. But if it becomes the focus rather than the other stuff, I think you're losing out on what made this offense so explosive in the first place.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I guess we'll have to wait for, the real games to be able to make that determination on if it is. But, what I would say, John, is we do talk about practice, and it's where you're supposed to work on things you're not great at. And they haven't been great at this in the past, even with all the big plays that they had. So
yeah, that's my hope.
A case of, they're working on what they're not good at. Jalen Hurts isn't used to throwing the ball underneath. Well, let's get him used to it through practice.
That was my hope, and I brought that up constantly in the spring. And I said, if that's the case, it's not a big deal.
Right.
My concern is when Jalen Hurts is off the field. Same thing. So that tends me that tends me to lean towards, okay, this is his default setting. And I don't want that to be the default setting. You know, if Kenny Pickett is forced to play, I have no problem with it. I don't want that to be the default setting with Jalen Hurts. Again, I admit I'm nitpicking. This is a tremendous offense. It's going to be good. It's just a matter of how good. But when you're and Kellen brushes off, you know, Doug's the one who said it, and he probably got in trouble for it. Not Doug Peterson, Doug Nussmeier.
Yeah.
When he mentioned 2.3 seconds, and Kellen was probably saying, "Oh, dude, don't put that out."
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
They've said it numerous times. I've looked back. I've talked to John Machota in Dallas. It's what they believe. That's my concern.
When you say you don't like it with Jalen Hurts, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, Jalen Hurts is obviously the off schedule stuff. You're limiting. You never know what's going to happen, right? If you're drilling into his head 2.3, 2.3, 2.3, you're never going to see what he might have done by extending a play and making a big play down the field. So number one, he's too good of an off schedule quarterback. One of the best in football, arguably, you know. There's a lot of different ways of being off schedule, not just running the football like people assume that means, you know, Patrick Mahomes is the best example. He doesn't run a lot. He runs in big spots and big moments, but he extends play, and Jalen's capable of doing that better than most, to say the least, in this league. So why do you want to cut that off? So that's number one. Now, I get it from a coaching perspective. You can't build off schedule offense into your game plan. So I get it from that perspective. It's not like you say, oh, third quarter, we're going to go off schedule. It doesn't work like that. It's just the feel of the game. So the concern is, and there are certain quarterbacks, and we all know who they are, where you want the ball out of their hands as quickly as possible. They're essentially playing point guard. I don't think Jalen Hurts is a point guard. I think he's and if he is a point guard, he's a Steph Curry like point guard who can impact the game in multiple ways, not only getting other people involved, but himself. He's one of the best playmakers in the NFL. In a bad year, everybody thinks he had a bad year. He generated, 38 touchdowns? I do not want to turn him into Brock Purdy, which has been my consistent, and Brock's a very good quarterback. But they're different styles of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, there are people who are like, why not let Jalen practice it? And, I'll bring up SMD Eagles. She says, I'll agree to disagree with Johnny Mack. Why not let Jalen practice short and intermediate routes when he wasn't the best at it? I don't think that's what John's saying. I think it's more that you don't want to do that stuff in place of part of what made Jalen Hurts great, and that's off schedule stuff. That's, when the play broke down and John was able, or Jalen was not John, Jalen was able to get outside and make a play. If you're constantly dumping the ball off, then those type of plays go away, and you don't have the chance for them. So if I don't want to speak for you, John.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it pretty consistently. If they're just practicing what they did poorly last year, I have no problem with that. I don't know if people didn't hear me. I've said that 10 times. I have no problem with it. My concern is what Doug Nussmeier said, what Kellen Moore has said in the past, what I've checked with people in Dallas, their belief system, what types of quarterbacks they were, 2.3 seconds, 2.3 seconds, 2.3 seconds. Then when you look at when Kenny Pickett is out there, that's how they're operating. When Tanner McKee is out there, that's how they're operating. When they played the game in Baltimore, that's how they're operating. I'm starting to think that's how they operate. I hope it changes, and I hope it's what the super chat explained. They know Jalen can do it, and they're just working on what he did poorly last year. I hope that is the case. I fear it's not the case.
Cameron follows up, says Jalen's not a point guard, but he should be able to tap into it if he has to. Just want him to have a well-rounded game. I think we all agree with that for sure, Cameron. No doubt about it. But you don't want to do it at the expense of what's made him great, and that's some of that off-schedule stuff. And I think, part of that.
Well, that's why I bring up Steph Curry. You don't want Steph Curry to be Mo Cheeks for old school Sixers fans.
Exactly.
Yeah, you want him to be able to do both. And that's a tightrope you got to walk. And I haven't seen him walk.
Because I do view the short and underneath stuff as essential to the game, but you don't want to do it. You don't want to go overkill with it.
No, you don't want to turn him into something he's not. Now, if they're forced to play Kenny Pickett, yeah, by all means, dive into the deep end of the pool. If Jalen's hurt for a week or whatever, yeah, 2.3 seconds. Use the playmakers. Get the football out of his hand as quickly as possible. I think you're leaving a lot of meat on the bone if you're trying to force the 2.3 rule on Jalen Hurts. And I'm hopeful they're not. I'm hopeful that they are just trying to work on what they weren't successful at last season. I'm hoping they're trying to drill into, like, if it's 3rd and 10, all right, hot route, bang, get rid of the football. I'm hoping that's what it's about. But, their history says, and again, their own lives as quarterbacks says they believe in this 2.3 second rule.
John, do you think any of it ties back into the blitzing, where Jalen has struggled against the blitz in the past? We've talked about it. The defenses are going to blitz this guy. That's one of the ways that they figured out is how you can mitigate him, how his impact on the game. Do you think part of the underneath stuff is that, here's an easy out or something you can practice on that when that blitz is coming, where to go with the football to avoid the sack.
Well, a lot of it is the blitz, not all of it. I mean, the Eagles should be and are, by the way, that's the weird part. They were bottom 5 in just number of attempts throwing the football over the middle of the field, but they were top 5 in effectiveness when they did it. And that's about AJ Brown. I mean, you run a bang 8 route to AJ Brown, and it's like, taking candy from a baby. So part of it is just taking advantage of what you have in AJ Brown. And they have to do that more. But most of it has to do with the blitz and their ineffectiveness. And by nature, picking up the blitz is always about the quick game. The problem is the Eagles too often resorted to the quick screens outside to deal with the blitz. And about, got ugly at times. And they need to get better with identifying where the blitz is coming from, throwing behind it, things like that. And that has to do with the quarterback getting comfortable with the answers given to him by the offense, being on the same page as the receivers. As I've said a million times, you don't call hot routes, just like you don't call off-schedule offense. Those are adjustments made on the field, and they certainly have to get better. And they're not going to stop blitzing teams until they figure it out. The good news is, you saw it in Baltimore. It just worked out this way. I think you're going to see New England as a blitzing team. Minnesota, my God.
Yeah.
They're going to see a boatload. Yes, even in a preseason environment of blitzes. So but he's not playing in those games. So, I don't know how much it's going to help.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I do view it overall, I think, as a positive. Well, here, I'll ask this just to follow up. Have what you've seen so far in practice make you believe that they are changing Jalen Hurts? Like, are they not throwing big plays? Are they not having big plays? Is there
No,
or
I'll read you what Andrew said yesterday. That's because Andrew's my most trusted guy who was at the practice. The guy knows football. Andrew DeCheck.
yeah, I
He
love talking to
knows
him.
football.
Yeah, he does.
And I'm not talking about off the field stuff. I'm talking about pure football. He knows football. And he said big explosive plays eluded the offense. Hurts' ball placement was largely on the money as the passing game seemed to exclusively run through A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Big volume day for Brown, who looked unguardable, particularly on intermediate throws. Nothing wrong with that, but in that effusive praise was big explosive plays eluded the offense. And then you go back to what I said at the start of the show about the New England defense and Jabril Peppers seeming to think they had a good day because they're probably walking in there saying, well, it's going to be a tough day. AJ, Devontae going to make some plays down the field. Big explosive plays eluded the offense. You could generally write that sentence for every practice and training camp. A lot of intermediate stuff. AJ's been dominant on those quick slants, the bang 8 routes. Dominant. And all that is good, but this was, this has been one of the best teams in football generating explosive plays down the field. And you have not seen a ton of it in training camp to date. And I hope, but hope is not a strategy. They're just working on what they were not effective with last year, or things that they were effective with but didn't throw enough, those over the middle of the field routes. That's my hope. But until you see it change, you can't assume it's going to change.
You're not at a sound the alarms yet, right? You're just kind of monitoring this.
No, yeah, I'm just monitoring it. But I again, Baltimore was 11 yards. 11 yards. And
yeah, by the way, wasn't this a problem for Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh? Didn't push the ball down the field enough?
Well, Kenny doesn't have the strongest arm. And again, he's the type of quarterback that if you have to play him, I think you play like a Brock Purdy style of football, for lack of a better term. That's the style of football you play or should play. Tanner McKee's a little bit different. He can push the football down the field. Now, he's not throwing to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So I'm not talking about effectiveness, but they didn't stretch the field with them. Like, throw Jacob Harris runs a 4.39. Take a shot. I'm not talking about the effectiveness, but all of a sudden you had Jacob Harris who runs a 4.39, can't get separation because Baltimore knows everything's going underneath. Again, these are third string players. Nobody cares, but that's what happened at Baltimore. All their defensive backs by the end of the game were just jumping routes because they knew nothing was going over their heads. Now, you're not game planning, but that talks about you're still calling plays, and in the moment, like all you're doing is, all right, this is my default setting. This is what I'm going with.
Right.
So something to keep an eye on.
One more follow-up here, and then Abe, I see your super chat, brother. I will get to that super chat in just a second. Big Pickin follows up and says, I thought this is what we wanted Jalen to grow into. It's a good point, John, that you've heard a lot of people say, last year, remember the criticisms of Jalen Hurts.
Well,
it's kind of that fine line of like,
what
do we want or how do you make Jalen better without changing who Jalen is? Is that just a fine line we're going to be walking here all year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people are not going to be happy if they're not getting explosive plays. So, I mean, they might think they want that. They might think you want to dump the ball off to Saquon. And then you get 7 yards and, all right, you live to play another down. So, I mean, I think people got pretty excited about the explosive plays and getting the football down the field, even to Olamide Zaccheaus. That was one of the biggest plays of the year. Everybody's so excited. Guess what? That was off schedule. That was Jalen creating offense out of nothing. And if you're getting the football out in 2.3 seconds, you're not creating that play. So he needed to get better. You want to see that evolution. I have no problem with an evolution. But, I don't want the overcorrection. I want the correction. I don't want the overcorrection.
Yep, I agree with that for sure. So good stuff there. Let's get to our super chat here from Abe, 199. Thanks, Abe. Appreciate you, brother. He said, "Are we going to have more run plays this season?" Abe, are you talking about with quarterback or I guess I need you to be more specific with that, Abe? I don't know. John, do you know what he means by this?
Well, no. I mean, the +1, Jalen looks healthier. He looks more juice. I think the +1 running game aspect is back in play at full bore, at least early in the season. As far as running the football, just running the football, when people talk about run pass ratio, all that means are you tell me if they're ahead in the fourth quarter or behind. If they're ahead, they're going to run the football to try to close games. If they're not, or it's a close game, they're going to throw the football. So that is wholly dependent on where you are in the game. But the Eagles should be better in 4-minute offense to be able to close games out with Saquon Barkley than they were with DeAndre Swift and even Miles Sanders. They should be better in that aspect, and he should give them a better opportunity to close out games on the ground.
Yep, good answer there from Johnny Mack. Hopefully that answers your question. Abe, good stuff there. John, we'll take one more commercial break. Maybe one more break at the end, but we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll come back. We'll kick around some of the depth chart changes and where those position battles are. We talked a lot about the linebacker. John, this week has been like linebacker week here on Birds 365. But we'll talk about the right guard. We'll talk about wide receiver 3. We'll talk about.
I do have a linebacker point I want to make, though. I was.
We'll bring it up, John. Any linebacker points are welcome here on.
And
Birds
this is and I'm going to defend the Eagles linebackers and pass coverage a little bit.
I love it. So we'll hear that all coming up next here on Birds 365, 368 watching on YouTube, and another around 200 on our other platforms. So thanks everybody for watching this morning. Appreciate all of our channel members. Reminder to our channel members, you're going to have a chance to win Saquon Barkley jerseys all year long every time he goes over 125 yards in a game, rushing, receiving, kickoffs, doesn't matter what it is, 125 or over, and we're giving away a jersey to a channel member that week. So if they play 20 games and he goes over 125 every week, we're giving away 20 Saquon jerseys. So good stuff there. And then SMD Eagles, I did not forget about you and your Braden Mann request. That's something I will fulfill. So appreciate all you guys being here, all of our channel members. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.